So I'm delighted to be joined by James Osborne, who is the CEO of the Recruitment Network. And TRN have over 1,000 recruitment organizations in the UK as part of their membership group. And James is probably one of the most informed when it comes to what's happening in the job market today. What should employers consider when going into 2026? And generally just what's happening in the market right now. So really, really pleased to get into it today. Welcome, James. From your perspective, you see a lot with your membership and the people that you're working with day to day, the conversations that you're having. You work with recruitment organizations, big, small, and everything in between across multiple different sectors. As we all know, like this year has not been the easiest year in recruitment and in hiring in general. But how would you describe the hiring confidence going into 2026 and what's genuinely improving and what isn't?
Yeah, it's really interesting because if you think about it, I mean, every sector is different. So you have to always factor that in. But I suppose if I was to do a very crude summary of the year and where we're up to at the moment, what's happening now, and this is based on working with lots and lots of recruitment organizations and looking at their data, I think generally the first half of this year was quite a tight market and quite a tight industry. There was a lot of caution going around the hiring. So a lot of organizations weren't really hiring, or they're questioning their hiring, or doing a hell of a lot more due diligence than ever before. Probably not a bad thing. What we've seen in the second half of the year, that sort of confidence is starting to come back a little bit now. There's still caution there, without doubt, but I think organisations are a lot more confident to move forward. I think they're a little bit over all the changes that have been happening from a geopolitical point of view, and sort of realize in their businesses they need to keep moving forward irrespective of what's happening around them, to an extent, although with a little bit of a caveat around being cautious. But I think one thing that's really coming out from this is, like, if you look at the trends, I think organizations that are hiring at the moment tend to be hiring for a lot more value. They want to get a better and a bigger return on investment from their headcount growth. So if I'm going to hire more people, I want to get more productivity, more performance out of them. I think AI has driven that conversation to organizations that probably haven't thought about it as much. So I don't think people are slowing down their hiring. I don't think people are necessarily saying we're not hiring and building teams. I think the types of people they're looking for is change, and their expectations of what I can get out of a new hire in the future, I think, is increased, which I think is probably a good thing. I think just generally.
hmm Yeah, that's good to know. We'll get into that in a moment, especially with how technology and AI is affecting things.
Mm.
But where in terms of the hiring confidence side of things, where are you seeing things strengthening versus weakening at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, again, it looks there's a difference and there's a caveat with this when you look at people who are hiring sort of a flexible workforce more so over than a permanent workforce. So we're seeing a lot more interim, a lot more contracts, a lot more fractional hires coming through
hmm
at the moment. You'd expect that based on that caution that's in the marketplace. So again, it will be different depending on the marketplace, but certainly markets, things like, green energy, advanced manufacturing, any regulated sectors are certainly driving more demand. We had lots of conversations with life sciences at the moment. They're seeing a sort of a nice big bounce back at the moment. So again,
Okay.
I suppose it's the areas that you would expect. Even technology took a hit, but then parts of technology are absolutely booming at the moment, especially things to do with machine learning and with data. Cybersecurity obviously is getting more and more busier and busier, sadly, but it's
Mhm.
reality, because the more and more we're becoming more tech infiltrated in our businesses, the more cyber is going to have more of an impact as well. So I think generally across the typical ones you'd expect. But then we are seeing some markets seeing growth, but more on during using a fractional sort of workforce, more so, more of a flexible workforce, I suppose.
hmm And how are you seeing the sort of private equity venture capital market at the moment?
It's confused, I think. It's a little
Mm.
bit confused. We've seen some extraordinary behaviors in some, please be careful what I say here, some extraordinary behaviors in some of the private equity thing. And generally, I think there's been a little bit of spook, I suppose is the word. So getting close to doing deals, and last minute they got spooked by a particular market, just not quite sure, is it good enough? Where's it going, and that type of stuff. But generally, the private equity market, there's a lot of pepped up cash that needs spending. So there's a lot of investment that's going to be spent and is being spent. But I think people are really trying to figure it out. The world, if I can be really honest with you, the world of work, everyone's a bit confused at the moment with exactly what's going on and what tomorrow could and should look like. Um, So you're always going to see in these environments, and this is very much in the private equity world as well. You're always going to see in these environments people who are just going to wait and just see what everyone else does. You're going to see a group of people who are going to take first mover advantage and basically, irrespective, we're going to lead the charge on this one. And then there are going to be people who are just going to literally just flip the industries completely and go into completely different sectors. So we're seeing it again. I think we've gone through that over the last 12 to 18 months. I think we're now coming out the other side of that. And we're going to see a lot more investment happening, especially in the first half of next year, in comparison to what we've seen this year. And we spend a lot of time with private equity firms and venture capital, and there's definitely a demand out there without doubt now. But they've got to spend their money somewhere, but in the right places, and they want to get a different return on investment, I think.
I think it comes down to risk appetite, doesn't it? And I think where at the moment organizations are a little bit more risk averse and they're just getting used to all of this uncertainty in the world. But I think as business resilience grows over time and people just get used to the fact that we're not going to live in a certain world for maybe ever again, it's just we just got to get on with it. And I think that risk appetite will just slowly come back over time. And like you said, when they do hire, they just want to see the value of what those hires are bringing to the table.
Well, yes and no. Again, I think that risk appetite, I think the question is fascinating. And you see it in business. If you look at what's going on in the US, for example, or around the world, or around the AI investments that are happening at the moment, you could argue the risk appetite just isn't there. I mean, people are just pumping cash in all over the place. And we've got that classic sort of ridiculousness about the markets happening. What people don't know is whether that's sustainable, whether it's going to burst, or whether it's going to diminish, or what's going to happen to it next. So I think we are seeing risk appetite changing depending on what the markets are that you're focusing on. As simple as that. But if you're in a boom market right now, in a market that is being pushed hard by government changes, by legislation changes, by trade movements, etc., your market will grow. There will be investment. Your risk appetite is probably looser. If you're in some of those traditional markets that some people have been in the past, where it's just been a hell of a lot tougher for a period of time, and there doesn't seem to be any change around the corner in those markets, then I think you're going to be spending a lot more time doing a lot more due diligence and probably a hell of a lot more cautious.
I think generally that when we compare the SME market to the private equity backed market, I think we've felt there is more hiring and more appetite for growth in the private equity market, just because that's the nature of what they are, right? They have usually a 5-year cycle. They want to
Mm.
get from A to B over that period, and in order to get to B, they need the right team and the right people in the right seats to get there, and they've got that injection of cash at the start to ensure that they can afford to do so. Whereas the SME market at the moment is just, like you say, just a bit uncertain. There may be a bit struggling on the cash flow front, so every single hire needs to be absolutely perfect.
Yeah, but again, you've got these new SME businesses coming to the front now who are growing and expanding at really rapid rates, because of what's happening in the world. The changes have basically fallen into their lap and created opportunities for them at the same time. So I think we need to be careful sometimes when we go, the SME market is here and that's there. Within the SME market, there's two or three very, very different stories happening at the moment. And I think organizations need to look at that separately and go, okay, well, there's emerging businesses happening because of what's happening. There's businesses that are in decline because of what's happening as well, and that's obviously the money generally goes to where the opportunities are going.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we get onto the future of work, what would you
Mm.
say are the most significant shifts you're seeing in how companies structure work and teams heading into 2026?
With regards to sort of the hybrid working model, that type of stuff, or
Yeah, it could be hybrid, the like hierarchical structure, the adaptation of blending human and AI
yeah.
tasks, what that looks like, because it's changed quite a lot in just 12 months, right?
It has, and it's going to continue to change. In some cases, it's shifting back a little bit to previous methodologies because people tested it, tried it, got excited, and then it didn't quite work. So I might go back to what we had before. I think we're seeing a number of different things. I think there's one thing without a shadow of a doubt is it comes back to this productivity. We're talking a lot. I just literally come off a call with someone talking about the productivity revolution that's happening at the moment. And I think people are just obsessed about productivity. Again, AI is driving this. So, everything we do we need to do it? Is there a better way? Is there a quicker way? Is there a more efficient way of doing things? So I think every role of the future is driven by some question mark around the efficiency, the productivity of that role in particular, not to replace it. I think this is where the question around AI gets very confusing. I think a lot of people think AI is here to replace jobs. It's not. It's here to augment jobs. It's here to make roles more effective than they were yesterday. I think that's really, really exciting. So I think the worker of tomorrow will be significantly more effective and more efficient and more productive than they were yesterday. That's great. And then it's what you then do with that and how many of those you need in your business to be able to deliver the functions that you need and so on and so forth. So I think we're seeing a lot of that. I think we're seeing a lot of redeployment, so retraining and redeployment of people. So some roles in businesses are becoming obsolete, or certainly components, or let's put it another way, the majority of the tasks within those roles are now becoming obsolete because of AI can do some of those things. So rather than get rid of great people, what a lot of organizations are thinking about first is, could I retrain, redeploy them within my organization before I necessarily have to get rid of them? The big tech firms that we always read about in the news are the ones who sort of fire people en masse because it's their chance just to cut out and sort of change their model and bring in more quality people in a very short space of time. They're quite relaxed about that. But most organizations, I think, are looking at, I've got great people in my business. How do I create a structure to allow them to flourish in this new world of working moving forward, as opposed to necessarily just get rid of them because they don't quite have the skills we need anymore, type thing.
Yeah, I hope that there is a positive impact on where like AI and human intersect. And I think when you're talking about productivity there, it reminded me of, actually, if you think about most people's jobs, there's probably at least 20-30% of that job that's pretty boring and pretty manual and pretty repetitive. And actually, if we can free up people to do more meaningful work, then there's going to be more fulfillment, and then hopefully, down the line, more retention, more happiness, and that's the
So
utopia, right?
honestly, I totally agree. I can really clearly see a world where a 3-day weekend is the norm because we can get 40% more done during those 4 days during the week. And surely that's a good thing, because it means we can spend more time with our families and do all the stuff that we work really hard for to do anyway in the first place. So if we get this right, I think we could create a better world for workers. I really genuinely believe that. If we get it wrong, which is, let's be honest with it, UK, the UK economy's got a pretty good track record of getting these things wrong, as the global has, actually, for that matter. So if we get this whole play right, I think this could be a really, really good thing for people, for workers, for jobs, and generally, there'll be definitely more jobs being created than there will be otherwise, and then be removed. But it's how we it's our relationship with work is changing, and I think when people understand that and then go, actually, this is potentially a really, really good thing for workers, then I think that's really exciting. And it will be, you'll definitely see this without doubt. You will see organizations of the future that are the employers of choice, the ones that your organization will be representing out there in the marketplace, will be the ones who have figured that out and actually saying there's a really nice balance between a worker and technology and AI, performance and productivity and outputs and expectations. And we figured out that balance, which means everybody is winning in this and everybody is happy. Now, shareholders are happy because they're getting more productivity and return on investment. Workers are happy because they've actually got more balance in their life, whatever that looks like, and so on and so forth. And I think that's great.
And with that then, and the way things are evolving, what skills and behaviours do you think are becoming sort of non-negotiable for employers across most sectors?
Well, I mean, let's be honest about it. The ability to embrace and continue with change, because we live in a continuously changing world, the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous VUCA markets that we live in at the moment is the norm. So, you need to have workers who have the ability to change and adapt and embrace change, number one. I think you need to have, there's a big part of the big push at the moment around the soft skills at the moment. The more the world becomes tech driven, the more people need more human time. So your ability to be a human is actually a really important skill. Sounds ridiculous, even as a skill, and for that matter, in fact, I'm even saying it. But that to me is becoming more and more of a skill. So from a sale, if you're in sales, for example, your ability to do proper negotiations face to face to get in front of customers is the skills that you need to be a great salesperson. Less so about the data manipulation type stuff or whatever. Um, if you are a finance leader in a business, your ability to be able to lead a team and influence a team properly, face to face, knowing that they may be working in a hybrid environment with technology, with worker bots within that team, is what you've got to get your head around these pieces. And all of these are soft skills, as more than anything else. So I think outside of the traditional stuff and outside of all the obvious skills, which means, I need to understand how to prompt if I'm going to use AI, et cetera, and build AI agents and that sort of thing, which most people sort of need to do now, probably are doing anyway. Then it's the softer skills that are going to become significantly important. We talked about this at an event I ran a couple of weeks ago, which is talking about the importance of trust, the word trust. I think that word trust is going to become probably the most used word in 2026, because there's a lot of organizations, a lot of people who don't trust what they see and what they read anymore. Classic example, if I use recruitment, if you don't mind, as an example of that, I could be a really ordinary candidate who hasn't got. I've got 20% of the skills that you need for this particular job, and with using AI, I can build the perfect CV, the perfect cover letter, the perfect video of me. I can then apply to over 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 jobs in the space of 30 seconds using tech and AI. So you've got these poor organizations out there now who are receiving applicant after applicant after applicant from candidates who just are nowhere near ideal, but we feel obliged to interview them because on paper they look amazing.
Mm.
That's why I think having a middle person like a recruitment organization is so important, because it's becoming harder and harder and harder to find great talent. And the reality is the great talent is in more and more of a short supply, and will continue to be so. So this trust piece becomes really important. My ability to navigate through, what am I seeing? What am I reading? Do I trust it? Look at things like stuff we read in the newspapers at the moment, some of the stuff you see on social media, you don't believe it anymore, because Sora can produce an incredible video that produces it and you think it's real. Putin and Trump were having coffee together last Thursday in Starbucks on Carnaby
Yeah.
Street. It's like, really? Well, yeah, it looked pretty damn realistic looking at it. So why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And a quick note on attraction and retention when it
Mm.
comes to talent. What are the main reasons people are leaving roles right now, and what retention strategies are actually working?
This has been a lifelong question, and probably a lifelong thing that we've been trying to work out as well, is what really drives engagement. We've done a load of surveys around this to try and understand that as much as we possibly can. We've looked at lots of data that's out there. Money is always the number one thing that people think about, how the importance of money. Money is important, obviously, and more there's cost of living challenges and everything else. Obviously, the money creeps up again. I do always argue a little bit about the money piece, because you've got cost of living challenges, and then we've got Black Friday coming up on this Friday, I believe it is. You've got Black Friday coming up when everyone goes out and then buys themselves 3 or 4 new plasma screen TV. So hang on, one minute I can't heat my house, next minute I'm watching TV with a new TV set. So there is that sort of balance a little bit about what people see as value and money and what they need their money for. But money isn't really the driver of engagement in many cases. So paying people more money all the time doesn't necessarily make a difference, I don't think, particularly. In many cases, money is only important until money doesn't become important, or is off the question of money is off the table. And then what are the things that drive engagement? What makes people work harder when they get to work? Those types of things. And generally, it's things like you'd expect. So it's like my ability to properly achieve. I'm achieving something. I'm growing. I'm developing. People really want to feel that more so than ever before. Um, there's that piece around making a difference to the world, the bigger picture. There's sort of the ikigai concept of, I'm not just here to make a living. I'm here to actually have an impact on other people's lives. Certainly some of the newer generations coming into our workforces are thinking that. And remember, this is an important thing. There's 5 different generations of workers now in our workplaces for the first time ever in history. So what engages a millennial is very different from what engages a baby boomer and a Gen X, etc. So you got to understand these different nuances of that, which makes leadership even harder than ever before. So yeah, so there's lots of nuances with it, sadly, but the general stuff that we find is people's ability to grow, develop, they're improving, they're moving forward, they're part of a winning team. That's the stuff that really creates engagement that matters. The engagement when people are at work and wanting to do a better job than they were doing yesterday. Money sort of makes them turn up in the first place. It's the other stuff that keeps them there and makes them work harder when they get there, I think.
I love that ikigai. That's such a good point. The Japanese have got it right, haven't they?
They really have, and it's not rocket science when you look at it. It just makes sense. But when you show that to someone, and the amount of times I've shown people ikigai, they look at it and they just look, their faces just drop. They look so sad because they know one of them or two of them are really missing. Because I just don't, I don't have ikigai. I'm never going to have it. You know,
It's
well,
so simple.
it is, and organisations need to drive it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So on talent attraction, then, what are candidates responding to most strongly right now, and where are businesses wasting time or money when attracting the right talent?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is the presence of the leadership team is huge, I think. So when I always say to people, if you're running a recruitment campaign, you need to be getting the leaders of that business on camera and in front of your target audience, in front of your candidates. So, you know, if you were recruiting for one of your clients, Leo, I would suggest you get the leadership team in a room and you interview them and you use that as part of the shortlisting process for the candidate that you're bringing into the process, because people want to work for genuine, authentic leaders, the ones that have navigated through these change processes, volatile, uncertain markets in the right way. They haven't just cut heads for the sake of it. They've been really thinking about their people strategies and everything else. So I think that to me is the number one thing I would say. I think that's the thing that's really attracting people more than anything else. And I would be putting leadership, authentic leadership, at the top of my my sort of sales outbound go-to-market strategy.
Love that. Final question. If you were advising a CFO or CEO on how to future-proof their team for 2026 and beyond, what would you tell them to prioritize today?
I would, as a lover of AI for what I think it can do, I would sell them to really get their head around AI and build org charts within their teams which incorporate worker bots as much as humans at the same time. So, and some people find that really hard to get their head around, the idea of little robots sitting in their offices and that sort of stuff. But
like AI agents.
Like AI agents, exactly that. So, you know, if you look at all the work a CFO does in an organization, there are a bunch of things that they do which they don't need to be doing. And actually, it's not about replacing them. It's about saying, if I took that 40% of that job away from you and gave it to a worker bot, an AI agent, that frees you up to do 60% of the stuff that you're really good at, which I think in this case is advising and doing proper commentary stuff to boards about helping them understand and translate what the data is telling, the finance data is telling them, etc. That's where a CFO has most value. So I think for me, that would be the number one thing I'll say to a CFO: build an org chart that incorporates worker bots and agents to free you up to do your best work.
Love that. James, thank you so much for your time and your insights. That's been really, really valuable. And hopefully our audience will find it just as valuable as I have.
Pleasure. Thanks, Leah. Good to see you.
Cheers, James.
Cheers. Bye-bye.